Coming up, how much longer? Why production delays are derailing the timely launch of Kansas City's new streetcar line. Plus, are you ready for the return of red light cameras? Dreams die in Johnson County as the plug is pulled on the rebirth of Metcalf South. An abrupt exit in Independence leads to a lot of unanswered questions, and why a proposed new dress code for interns runs afoul in the Missouri Capitol. Welcome everyone, I'm Nick Haynes, and it's terrific to have you with us again on the program that goes beyond the soundbite and takes you behind the headlines, making news in Kansas City, dissecting those stories this week from 98.1 FM KMBZ Scott Parks, from The Pitch, reporter Steve Vokrot, and from the Kansas City Star, City Hall reporter Lynn Horsley, and Star reporter, columnist and blogger Dave Helling. Is there going to be a delay in opening Kansas City's new streetcar line? Hiccups by the manufacturer may delay delivery of the streetcars, which were first scheduled to begin arriving in June, then September. Now, who knows? The city said they wanted to begin testing these vehicles in the fall, but you wouldn't begin riding them until next year. So what difference does it make, Lynn Horsley?
Well, we don't know yet. The Deputy Public Works Director said he's going to New York next week to try to figure out how close they are to getting these streetcars finished. They were supposed to originally deliver them in June. And then they had said, well, late September, and everybody thought that will be okay because that's about the time the entire route construction will be finished. The streetcars take a lot of testing. They have to drive them for 300 miles along the route before they can actually carry passengers to make sure they're safe. And that is a number of days, a certain number of days, and there are 3 or 4 vehicles that they need to test. So I think their hope was that they would have all fall and part of the winter to test them and be ready to open the route to the public right before the Big 12 conference tournament in early March. And because it appears that New York, the manufacturer, is late in finishing these vehicles, they may not meet that sort of artificial deadline.
The manufacturer is in Spain, but they're being assembled in Elmira, New York. But they haven't done these streetcars before, but they're being built there because they wanted to have it being made in America. Is that the deal, to have that label put on them? Right, the Buy America requirement. And so that, some of the shipping between, overseas, as I understand it, is part of what the delay is in getting them made and getting them delivered. They're going to be, it appears they're going to be late in Cincinnati as well, and since Kansas City's and Cincinnati's orders for the streetcars are intertwined, it looks like there's going to be a delay. Whether or not it can open for the tournament is a big question. I think an extension to this is I think the city is very jittery about this news because they want to expand the streetcar, and they don't want to give critics any opportunity to seize on, well, there's a delay in this project, even though most people know that there's the delay in all kinds of major municipal capital projects. But do people really care about a few months delay, Scott?
Well, I don't think that the supporters are going to care so much about a few months delay. Obviously, if you're coming into town for the Big 12 tournament in March and you wanted to use it to get to your hotel down at Crown Center, certainly you do. But to follow up on what Steve was saying, and I am a former skeptic turned semi-supporter of the streetcar line if and when it becomes expanded, which obviously is the end goal. But I think this delay, even though I don't think it's fair, I do think this plays into the hands of some of the cynics and the skeptics who say, see, this isn't going to work. This doesn't work. This is Kansas City, where, other than Oklahoma City, geographically the second largest city in the country, and we're a car town. We're a car town. And I think this plays to some degree into the hands of the skeptics.
Is there any other concerns beyond just getting these streetcars delivered on time, Dave Helling? Is everything else going on track?
Well, the construction looks like it's quite on schedule along Main Street, and we should keep in mind that there is a penalty to the manufacturer of these cars for each day they fail to meet the deadline. It's not a huge penalty, but there is some financial impact. And the other thing to keep in mind, Nick, is while the city wants to open this by the Big 12 tournament, there is no real financial reason to make that deadline since everybody rides it for free. It isn't as if you're missing this huge amount of traffic that is going to spend millions of dollars to ride the streetcar. It's a free experience. So it's much more about public perception of the streetcar system rather than any financial impact.
That penalty, by the way, Lynn, is...
It's pretty paltry. I got an email from somebody, a lawyer, who said, you know, for liquidated damages, $1,000 a day, that's hardly an incentive for the manufacturer to speed up their process. That was actually probably negotiated by Cincinnati. We are piggybacking with their contract, and Kansas City really didn't have any role in determining that penalty. It probably should have been higher. That would have been an incentive for the company to get its act together.
2 Missouri state lawmakers have been brought down recently in Jefferson City in intern scandals, but is changing the dress code for legislative interns a solution? Lawmakers are weighing in with their suggestions on how to best improve the Missouri House intern policy, and one early notion being kicked around is establishing an intern dress code.
Honesty is always the best policy. Having a modest dress code, something that is going to eliminate any temptations to look further or harder on either way, male to female, female to male, just makes a lot of sense.
What's been the response, Steve Ockrott?
Oh, I don't think it's been good. I think, you know, the comments by some of the legislators saying, well, you know, we need these interns to adopt a dress code so that we don't have this distraction is sort of mirrors this tone deafness that Missouri legislature in general has been receiving over the last year and maybe even longer than that about, you know, it's sort of a good old boys club, and, you know, they're saying, the subtext behind what they're saying is, you interns need to dress better so you don't become a distraction for me, and I think a lot of people just thought that was really ridiculous.
Scott.
This is classic blaming the victim scenario here. What they need to do, and it could be, the new policy could be in one sentence: stop texting your interns. And leave it at that. I've worked at KMBZ for 20 years. We've had countless interns walk in and out of our doors. I cannot recall one time I've ever texted one, that I've ever called one on their personal cell phones. This plays into the stereotype that the Missouri Capitol is nothing more than a rerun of Animal House, and that these guys can't keep their pants on even though they're married back home. They have these attractive interns, and if they would just dress more conservatively, I wouldn't be tempted to want to have sex with them.
Now, there have been other suggestions, though, Dave, I mean, including shortening from the governor himself, shortening the legislative session. It's too long. If there was a shorter session, they would have less distractions. They would be more focused on their work. Whatever happened to that idea?
Well, that's one suggestion. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but that's one suggestion that has been made, Nick. There are others. And one of the things that I think is the result of the little kerfluffle this week is to indicate to all of us, by the way, it's very, you know, it's the most mockable thing in the world to come out and say the real solution is to get the interns to dress more modestly. I mean, that anyone who would issue that statement and not understand the reaction that was coming probably isn't paying attention. But the broader implication is, one of the things you heard in the wake of the deal and the Lavoda scandals is, some lawmakers were saying, look, it's not just about interns, it's really not just about sex, it's the entire culture in Jefferson City of unlimited contributions, lobbyists buying dinners. I mean, Missouri clearly has the most unethical legislature in America. I mean, there's really no quibble with that. And so you heard some lawmakers say, hey, look, we can use this scandal as a way to get to broader ethical reforms going forward. What we saw this week indicates how hard that is, because some legislators just don't get it. You know, they just don't understand why people are concerned broadly about the way Missouri runs its government. And that makes the possibility of ethics reform, in my view, much more difficult to obtain next year.
But are lawmakers really held accountable for those things? Because when it comes to election time, there are so many other issues that make the priority list for folks. Most of those are pocketbook issues. It could be social issues, from guns to abortion. Ethics reform, campaign finance reform are not high on people's list, are they, Scott?
No, not necessarily. But you were talking about, are they held accountable? I think Deal and Lavoda would tell you that they're being held accountable. Their political careers have been completely ruined, and they should have been. These are grown men acting like college kids or even younger in the state legislature. And I go back to this idea, and to Dave's point about being completely out of touch, to issue a statement saying that we need the interns to dress more modestly, I think the word was conservatively in the paper, so that we're not distracted. I mean, if the interns were running around wearing Daisy Dukes and tank tops with no bra on, then maybe this would be necessary. But I find that hard to believe.
Drivers, brace yourselves. Red light cameras may be on the way back 2 years after they disappeared from Kansas City streets over legal concerns. In a new ruling this week, the Missouri Supreme Court opening the door to cities reinstating the cameras. To clear judicial scrutiny, red light cameras will now need to capture an image of the driver and charge motorists for a moving violation with points going on their licenses. So that was not happening in Kansas City, Lynn Horsley?
That was not happening. They were taking a picture of the rear license plate. It was treated as a parking ticket.
Okay. Could they have taken a photograph of people's faces?
They certainly could have. The City Council, this program started back in 2009, and I think the City Council, you know, wanted to catch red light runners, but they didn't want people's insurance rates to go way up. They kind of wanted it both ways. They wanted to stop the red light running, but they didn't want it to have a terribly punitive, you know, motor vehicle consequence. But the red light camera company does take front, you know, driver pictures. They do it in other states. I think that's going to be the direction we're headed now. You'll get a picture of the driver, and so the owner of the vehicle isn't necessarily presumed to be the violator. You'll have a better idea of who the violator is, and they will also have their points.
Now, they'll say this is about safety, but there's also a lot of money involved. It was about $2 million a year in revenue coming in from these cameras, Steve Okra.
Right, that's true. And I mean, there's some costs associated with administering it, but it was bringing in some revenue for the city. And I recall several years ago when some of this discussion was first starting in the City Council, and you may recall this too. I mean, they weren't really all that shy about talking about the revenue possibilities with the red light camera, and I felt like the safety argument kind of got brought up maybe a little bit after that. Maybe I'm being a little conspiratorial, but that was my recollection sitting in the council chambers.
It is true that when the program started, they were raking in the dough because they were catching an awful lot of people. But gradually, the red light running stopped, and there was an indication that probably there were fewer wrecks, at least the T-bone wrecks that can lead to injuries. Now, there's still critics, and a lot of people think, oh, it led to increased rear end accidents. But I think there was some evidence that it had a positive impact on red light running, and after they stopped the program 2 years ago, the red light running started up again. There are dangerous intersections, so I think the city would like to resume the program. They'll have to do it in accordance with the Supreme Court's ruling.
Can I just say very quickly, I think Kansas City has to be very careful in this regard, because there's an enormous amount of attention being paid to the idea of municipal court as a money raiser after Ferguson. And to the extent that people look at the red light cameras and say this is really about money and not about safety, they may get more criticism than they anticipate. And a corollary to that, Nick, is, I wrote a column on this. Kansas City, Missouri, this is not well known, collects $48.50 on every speeding ticket in court fees, not for the fine, just for fees for the sheriff's retirement fund, for domestic violence, for the court clerk. I mean, almost $50 for a speeding ticket. So the courts are, in some ways, being increasingly in the crosshairs, if you will, of people who believe they're all about money and they're not about justice or safety. To the extent that the red light camera controversy feeds into that, they'll want to be careful, it seems to me.
All that said, though, the city wants to move forward and continue with this program. I think they do.
I will also say that, you know, they were raking in the dough when the program started, but really the number of violations dropped considerably. And at the end, they had some revenue to show for it, but not nearly what they were seeing in other cities. And they were also going to be moving around the locations. So, you know, I think the city wants to do it.
Okay, just recently, the Kansas City Council voted to hike the minimum wage to $13 an hour. The first bump in pay actually goes into effect Monday. Now upset by the move, some key state lawmakers are threatening to kill the city's earnings tax, a tax, by the way, that makes up more than 1/3 of Kansas City's budget. The head of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Kurt Schaefer, says the only way employers will have the money to pay those wages is if the General Assembly takes immediate action to eliminate the 1% earnings tax. Is this just an idle threat, or should the new Kansas City Council be dreaming up a new revenue source for many of its city services, Dave?
It is a relatively idle threat. I don't think will be a serious move to end the earnings tax in Kansas City, particularly since it's on the ballot next year. Having said that, Kansas City should use this opportunity to take a good, hard, solid look at whether the 1% earnings tax is the best and only way for it to raise $180 to $200 to $220 million a year in revenue. And maybe this will be a prod to do some of that.
You had a front page story this morning, this is Friday,
right,
and talking about how actually Kansans, who are actually paying the earnings tax because they're living in, working in Missouri, will get refunds, though, from the earnings tax. Yeah. Who is actually paying for that, Kansas or Kansas City, Missouri?
So we're clear, it's not a refund from the earnings tax, it's a refund from the state of Kansas to Kansas taxpayers for money that they may have paid to Kansas City, Missouri for the earnings tax. That is, commuters from Kansas into Kansas City, Missouri. And there is a Supreme Court decision led to that ruling. And there is some suggestion that it might go in the other direction, that Kansas City, Missouri might have to pay refunds to residents who pay the earnings tax but work in Kansas across the state line. So we'll see how that works out. That's down the road a little bit. It's a very complicated story, but it also suggests that local income taxes need to be thoroughly understood and scrutinized periodically, which is what happens in Kansas City. It provides an enormous amount of revenue, but it's complicated and may not be the best way to raise revenue. It could be, may not be.
What I didn't understand from the story, though, is why it is, if that was viewed as double taxation, why it was that you could only get refunds back, or at least get some of that money back over the last 3 years. Right. Why can't it be for the whole time you've been paying it?
Statute of limitations in Kansas, there is a specific law that says you can only get additional credits or refile over a 3-year period. That's in the state law.
Well, we talked about certainly the increase in the minimum wage, which has brought about why they interested in killing the earnings tax, but that goes back on the ballot as a second measure this week, with a $15 minimum wage being approved by the City Hall.
We would need your whole show to explain this predicament. But number one,
or the tax refund thing, by the way.
I want to say real quickly, the minimum wage does not go up on Monday because there's a referendum effort that halted that.
It did halt that?
The council's $13 an hour proposal is on attack from people who think it's too high, who think it's too low. It's all stalled. They think they might put it on the ballot, a higher minimum wage on the ballot in November, but that might get undercut by the veto session.
And then we also have, our business groups are also want to have to void it altogether with another referendum.
And they've started a referendum that put a hold on the implementation, the Monday's start date. So there's no increase in the minimum wage right now. I will say to Dave, yes, the city should reevaluate the earnings tax. I don't expect they're going to back off on it. It is a huge part of the city budget. If you think city services are bad now, they would really fall apart without that earnings tax revenue.
Well, I would just caution everyone, and I would probably join this panel in saying that a $7 and whatever cent minimum wage is not a livable wage. But if you are in the lower middle class, get ready to be hurt the most, because there is not a company in this town that is going to absorb the cost of a $5.50 an hour increase on minimum wage employees. They will, just like Chipotle did recently. They announced that they were increasing the wages for their lowest paid employees by 14%. They turned right around and raised their prices 14%. Well, if you're making minimum wage and now all of a sudden you got a 14% pay raise, that's great for you. But if you're a lower middle class worker and you're going to go take a lunch break over at Chipotle or McDonald's, which is going to do the same thing, I'm sure, you're going to be the one that suffers the most.
Is there any evidence, though, Steve, since Kansas City, Missouri decided to raise that minimum wage, which is over a month ago now, that there's any evidence that A, any businesses have left Kansas City, Missouri, or B, that people have been raising prices, restaurants have been raising prices, or any other businesses have been raising prices as a result?
I haven't seen it. If it is, I'm certainly not aware of it. I don't think a month's time, and the fact that there's so much uncertainty, as Lynn illustrated quite well. I mean, this whole situation is really as clear as mud. So I don't think business owners are making decisions on this.
Well, we cross over the state line into Johnson County next, where county leaders have just bitten the bullet. For the first time in a decade, property taxes are going up in Johnson County by about $100 a month for the average homeowner. The money will be used for improving parks, expanding transit service, and boosting the library system.
The cost of the proposed levy rate increase for me would be slightly more than the cost of a Starbucks latte once a month. I don't think that is too much to invest in the quality of our community.
That was one citizen speaking before the Johnson County Commission before they voted for the tax hike, which at $100 for the average homeowner is more like 2 Starbucks lattes a month. Do you measure cost increases that way, Scott?
Having rarely ever been to Starbucks in my life, I would say no. But, you know, and it's not for most Johnson Countyans. This is not going to cripple their budget. I can't see a lot of families sitting around the kitchen table going, oh, honey, what are we going to do now? The commission's just killing us with this tax increase. But I would make the argument, being someone who lives in Johnson County, someone who has children, and I go to the parks frequently, I go to the libraries frequently, they seem to be, and maybe I'm missing the mark here, but they seem to be raising taxes for at least 2 things that don't really need to be improved. I don't find myself bored at Shawnee Mission Park. I don't find myself with a lack of things to read at the library or things to do. The transit system, and this would be incredible, if Johnson Countyans would actually get on a bus, I would find that borderline miraculous. I went walking, I live in Roland Park, and I went walking in my neighborhood last week, and I just happened to go by the Johnson Drive Transit Center. If I wanted to go anywhere in this town, north, I would have had to wait at least an hour. If I wanted to go south, I would have to wait at least 2 hours. And there's only one route. I can go to the Plaza or UMKC, or I can go south to 135th Street. That's it.
So that is a sentiment in Johnson County, and some people feel nobody rides the buses. Why do we need to do those things? So why did the Johnson County Commission then vote for this, particularly when they've always been sort of conservative on these tax measures, Steve?
Well, there's several different reasons. I mean, just sticking with the transit issue at this point, transit in Johnson County is actually at a pretty critical juncture. The KCATA, which is an organization that crosses both state lines, is sort of in this process of restructuring. Joe Reardon, the former Wyandotte County KCK mayor, CEO, he's taking over that organization. I think they really want to add some muscle to what that organization is going to do in terms of, you know, absorbing what was then the Joe and making it more integrated into transit on Kansas City, Missouri. Independence's bus system is actually now coming under the KCATA fold. And so I think this is actually a really interesting time and probably a pretty wise decision by Johnson County to place a bit more investment in transit to really see if, you know, the miracle that Scott alludes to can someday become a reality.
But you would have to make the Johnson County the Joe, worst name for a bus system in the history of the world.
That's why they're getting rid of it.
To make that bus system feasible for the average Johnson Countyan, you would have to expand it probably 500 times or more what it already is. Johnson Countyans are not getting out of their cars until or unless you can promise them, yes, you can get from Olathe or Southern Overland Park or the center of Overland Park to downtown, to the stadiums, to the airport at a cheaper and quicker way than you could do it in your car. And I think that is going to be a very, very tall order, and it would be a very expensive one.
Well, it is an expanding county, so people do need libraries, more parks, presumably, and there will be more need for transit with more people living there.
Well, one of the things that's expanding in Johnson County is the rate of people who are barely getting by. It's always been thought of as an affluent county. As that decreases in some areas, there's going to be more need for transit.
Let's just stay in Johnson County for a moment. Those grandiose plans to revitalize the former Metcalf South Shopping Center in Overland Park came to a screeching halt this week as developers pulled the plug on that $320 million project at 95th and Metcalf. Why, Steve Ogrod?
Well, so Overland Park crafted a plan, they call it Vision Metcalf, for what they want that whole corridor to look like. As it starts to rebuild, you know, some areas have become more urban, you know, like Metcalf South. So they've got this plan in place, and they don't want Metcalf to just look like a lot of other thoroughfares in Johnson County where you have a lot of big box and chains. They want it to look sort of more like this new urbanism concept that you've seen pop up. And the Planning Commission in Overland Park didn't seem to think that Lane 4's plans really fit into that. There was a lot of speculation that they just want to put a Walmart in there.
And a lot of the citizens there at the public hearings were protesting that. Oh, we don't want a Walmart here. And so was it the idea that a Walmart would come there that killed this?
I think that's part of it. I think that's what sort of triggered a lot of neighborhood opposition. And they weren't making a huge leap about whether it was a Walmart because the owner of the property is Stan Kroenke, who's married into the Walmart family. And so there's a lot of speculation that Walmart would be part of that mix. And there's already 20 other Walmarts in the metro area. And so I think people thought, if you're going to redevelop this, make it unique and make it really stand out.
Well, what happens now? Is it going to become like the Mission Mall site, which has been a vacant, weed-filled lot for 9 years?
No, I live within a stone's throw from it. You don't need to remind me. You know, it's an amazing issue in Johnson County that the death of the mall in Johnson County and the ability, even though the real estate is prime, to get somebody to build something that could be usable, that people would want in that area. The Mission Mall site is an absolute scab on Northeast Johnson County.
Yeah. Can I, you know, Scott is exactly right. The mall is a dying institution, or the mall as we understand it as we're growing up. And the biggest failure, in my view, in government is to not understand that they need to respond to where the world is going to be 20 years from now, not where it is today. We just talked about transportation in Johnson County, for example, and the need to fund it. In 25 years, that will be much more important than we think it is today. At the same time, the printed book is going away. So why do we need huge libraries with huge budgets and all these other things? You know, central libraries, we should at least think about that. That's kind of the subtext of this earnings text
community
thing.
Gathering
right,
places.
And because we all think of the world as we now understand it rather than what it's going to be.
Okay, very quickly, if Kansas City manager Troy Schulte was fired, it would be big news. So what about the news this week that the city manager of one of our largest cities is shown the door? Robert Heacock had been city manager in Independence for more than a decade. But the Independence Council voting to terminate him this week. What is behind that abrupt departure, Steve?
Well, the true exact nature of it is not quite known. They've been very quiet about it. They met very quietly to make the decision. Some of the follow-up I've done hasn't made a lot of hay. I will point out, though, that the city manager served for several years under Don Reimel, who was mayor of Independence. And it is not uncommon when you have a new mayor come in for the city council to follow and then replace the city manager with somebody more to the mayor's liking.
Alrighty, that is our weekend review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from The Pitch, Steve Vockrat and Dave Helling from The Star, Lynn Horsley from The Star, and 2 to 6 on KMBZ from Dana and Parks, Scott Parks. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us here at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.